Hello, everyone. I hope you had a good weekend. And to those who celebrate or took a break over this winter break or winter holidays, I hope you had a good time. For myself, I had I taken a break and had gone to a farm stay, not very far from here, but because of the storm that's going around in these parts, we got stuck. I think we stayed on for an extra 2 days, uh, compared to the original plan, and it was still a great experience. And I do have reflections on um, like the the behaviors of kindness that I got to see. We didn't do much. We were stuck in this cabin all day, and I wouldn't really call it stuck. We were very comfortable. We had everything that we needed. Enough food, heating, power, and I know that that was not the case for many other people. So I'm grateful that we still had a comfortable time. The worst thing that happened really, and it was not really the worst thing anyway. It was just that we were stuck for a couple of days, and even that was kind of blissful because of like what I said. The kindness of strangers. Anyway, that's a whole different tangent to this. And we just got back yesterday, which meant that I couldn't do this video yesterday anyway. So yeah, let's get started with the highlights today. So I'm switching, and let's get started. So the first one is from Guide to Organization Design. To contribute to the specific purpose and mission of the enterprise, to make work productive and the worker achieving, to manage the social impacts and social responsibilities of the organization. So I don't clearly remember where this comes from, as in what context it falls in, but it does seem like it's talking about the author is talking about the responsibilities of a manager, or a manager to whom people report, reporting manager in other words. So they may not be a specific, for example, an engineering manager. They may have a specific function, but there is this kind of a grander unifying function for all managers, and that is to, like the highlight says, to contribute to the specific purpose and mission of the enterprise, and to make work productive and the worker achieving, and to manage the social impacts and social responsibilities of the organization. So since I can't remember a lot more, I think I'm just going to skip. Moving on. Getting things done. If you had the freedom to decide what to do, you also had the responsibility to make good choices given your priorities. And this refers to, again, the privilege or the freedom that people in that people who are in a higher position in an organization, they typically have this freedom to decide what to do. And if you do have that, the author points out, if you do have that, you also have the responsibility to make good choices given your priorities. So it's kind of I can't remember what's that word called, um, but it's not all. It's not a bed of roses, having freedom to decide what to do, because you now have the responsibility to make good choices, and that's uh, I won't say even more difficult, but it is maybe just as difficult. Because if you have an idea of what you want to do, or if you're told what you need to do, you can just jump straight into it. You can just worry about what you need to do and be done with that. But if you have the freedom to decide, then it's a very ambiguous state, and you need to look at your priorities, the organization's priorities, what's going to create an impact in the long term, in the short term. Um, so many different variables that you need to keep in mind before you can decide that, okay, yeah, I do have the freedom, but I also have the responsibility to make a good choice. So yes, let's move on. Remote, not distant. Trust requires that someone take the first step. Leaders should be the first to demonstrate real trust in their employees. 50% is not enough. They need to supercharge the trust battery. Thriving in a hybrid workplace requires trusting employees beyond what feels comfortable. So this phrase comes into the, like, in the context, the author sets a context before, that typically when you start a new a relationship, any kind of relationship, professional, personal, anything, uh, you still don't know who the other person is. Can you trust them or not? And everything. And so typically, uh, you don't know you can trust them because it's like the first time you interacted with them, but you also don't know that you can't trust them, right? So the trust battery, the kind of like the measure of trust that you have for someone starts typically at 50%. And the author is making a point that in a hybrid workplace, especially, leaders should be the first to demonstrate real trust in their employees, and they should supercharge the trust battery, not start at 50%, but start at much higher, 90% or so, and show that, demonstrate that behavior to everybody, that no, we trust you, and that sometimes builds trust. So yeah, like that's, in my opinion, that's what the highlight says. Trust requires that someone takes the first step. We'll move on. Again, remote, not distant. At Spotify, teams have regular fail fikas. Fika is the Swedish word for having a coffee and a chat together. This ritual encourages people to share their mistakes and learn from each other's errors. And so I think, I mean, this appeals to me because we do a very similar thing in our organization as well. It has changed over the years. Earlier, we used to have something called, I mean, like, we are a remote organization, so our hangout spots are really Slack channels. So we had a Slack channel called Failure Wall, but then there was this connotation, and it got changed to lessons learned and various things over the thing. I personally like the word failure because it is strong enough to kind of give a pause. It's not, lessons learned. It's in my opinion, it's weaker. So I do prefer the word failure because, and when there is that connotation, but of course, like, that's what helps. I think that's what helps somebody to actually take a stance that, even when you have failed miserably, beyond all expectations, I'm using it in different context. Even if you have failed horribly, you can still share that because the channel name is just that, the failure wall or whatever that was. And the point is really that the point is to encourage people to share failures. It's not about take the next step, get the lessons out of it. That will happen. Once you start sharing the failure, that will happen. The lessons will come out. But the idea was to normalize failure, and that's the reason I like the name Fail Fikas. It makes it like, a strong word like fail, and combining it with like a casual word that represents having a coffee and chat together. So yeah, that's the reason I think I highlighted this phrase appeal to me. Otherwise, I don't think this is a very unique practice anymore. Many organizations do that, including my own. So we'll move on. Effortless. Often the most useful knowledge comes from fields other than our own. As researchers from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management found in analyzing almost 18 million scientific papers, the best new ideas usually come from combining existing knowledge in one field with an intrusion of unusual combinations from other disciplines. And this is from the book Effortless, but this whole thing, this highlight what it says, it's kind of the subject of the book range, and it was a very insightful book for me. There had this in my mind, before I read the book, I had this notion of specialization, generalization, and how specialization helps and everything, but I had never read anything that merited generalization for its benefits. And range was first such work which kind of pointed to me. I mean, whole it's not it's not a short book, and this whole book is devoted to describing the advantages of having a general knowledge background. And now this theme is repeating in many other books, like for example, Effortless, in this highlight over here. So yeah, let's move on. Oh, again, remote, not distant. Employees are encouraged to assume positive intent. If people say something that might feel uncomfortable, don't make it about yourself. Understand they understand they want what's best for the company. Right. Even though I'm reading this book right now, I think I'm a little lost, as in like where exactly this fits in. But I think the highlight is otherwise fairly straightforward. It's employees are encouraged to assume positive intent, and with distance, being in a remote setting, it's a lot more difficult to uh, to ascribe intent accurately on anybody's actions, because at least in person you can see the person, or be in person and see what's happening. You have a lot more signals, like the body language and everything. But in a remote organization, it's just the words and maybe a video chat here and then, and that's all the information that you have. And yeah, that's why it's even more important to keep this in mind, to assume positive intent. Let's move on. Team topologies. The goal for a DevOps team should be to put itself out of business by enabling the rest of the org. It's a good motto, like, just as anybody, that the DevOps team, they exist so that they become redundant. And interestingly, I mean, this book is a few years old now, and interestingly, at this time, there is a whole trend of not thinking about DevOps as such. Anyway, DevOps has become such synonymous. I mean, DevOps used to be referred to a culture or a set of practices that enable developer and operations team to work together. But now it has largely become about tools and skills, which is a whole other discussion I'm not going to get into. In any case, the trend right now is to think of things in terms of platform engineering, and compared to having a DevOps team, which is, like, the author has also air quoted it, um, which is kind of uh, it has its own set of problems and everything. And mainly because how this term gets understood, as well. So compared to that, thinking of things in terms of platform engineering, that's much more beneficial. Or let's see how that goes. That's something that I'm hoping to mirror in my own organization. So yeah, let's see how that goes. Let's move on for now. The voltage effect. Optimal quitting should become part of our strategy as we scale, rather than a panic button we hit as a last resort. As tech entrepreneur, investor, and author Reid Hoffman writes, it's easy to kill a product that's failing. It's much harder and more strategic to kill one that lacks the potential to truly scale. So this struck me because, excuse me, this struck me because we often say that don't think about quitting when you're building stuff, because it seems like an easy way out. And if you think of that while you're doing the difficult task of building something, it's it's very easy to make the decision that, as soon as things start getting tough, you quit. And this throws it in a different light, and along with all the other literature, that quitting isn't bad. And this whole notion, this whole cultural phenomenon we have around quitting, that quitters never win, winners never quit, and all of that stuff. By the way, like I heard on this podcast on on a discussion of another book. I think a book called Quitting or Quit by Annie Duke, and she says that this is not true. Winners actually quit a lot more times than the regular people, and that's the reason they win, because they know when to quit and focus their energies elsewhere. And this voltage effect, this book is a study on scaling. What are the factors that affect scaling and so on. So yes, if an idea is just mediocre, it's not going to scale. It works right now in the current context, but it's not going to scale. That it is much harder and much more strategic to kill it, that does not have the potential to scale. Comparatively, a product that's not working out, it's much easier to make the decision that, okay, it's not working out, let's kill it. So yeah, let's move on. A mind for numbers. You'll be surprised to see how often understanding arises as a consequence of attempts to explain to others and yourself, rather than the explanation arising out of your previous understanding. Okay, it's I mean, it is straightforward, but it's kind of like written in a different way. So the author is referring to, you're reading a book and you're understanding something, and you're really understanding that based on the previous understanding that you have. It's not like you're not starting from scratch really when you're reading a book, or you're trying to understand something new. You're basing it off on some other previous understanding. And while that helps, a much better approach is understanding as a consequence of attempts to explain to others and yourself. As in, you may not know that much about a subject, but if you try to explain it to yourself or try to explain it to somebody else, really, when you're trying to explain it to yourself, even in that case, you are trying to imagine a third person in your head you're trying to explain it to, and that is when the understanding comes much more easily, and compared to just building on previous knowledge. So the author's making a point. Yeah, go get out there, and even if you feel you don't know the subject very well, still go out and talk about it. I think we have discussed similar themes in earlier highlights as well, earlier, in the past. So we'll move on. 4,000 weeks. The overarching point is that what we think of as distractions aren't the ultimate cause of our being distracted. They're just the places we go to seek relief from the discomfort of confronting limitation. Right. So this is it's a thematic point, really. It's kind of like combines so many different themes in the book. We may say that, okay, something's distracting me right now. For example, I need to get some work done, but I go watch a TV show, um, or I start doing something else. A lot of other distractions. What, as we call it. But they are the ultimate cause of us being distracted. That's the point the author is making over here. The point that the author is making are that these are just the places that we go to where we feel comfortable, because we are seeking relief from the discomfort of confronting our limitation. There is something about that particular task that is limiting us, that's causing that feelings of limitation. And when we can't deal with that, that is when we go and seek out these places, these distractions, as the author is calling it. And I feel like we have discussed this in previous highlights, previous I don't know what to call these episodes, or videos. Yeah, videos is a good word. So we have discussed this in previous videos about procrastination, especially that we don't procrastinate because we're lazy. We procrastinate because we're dealing with some feelings of limitation, or we are in a discomfort zone, and so on. So, in the interest of time, today's video is turning out to be, little longer than the recent ones. So, I'm not going to go too much into it. But again, this book is a whole study in these aspects. It's like the book says it's for time management for mere mortals. It's a whole different approach, and I really like this book. So we'll call it a day, and this I think we can just skip. So we are done with the highlights today. I know it went a little longer. I'm seeing around 18-minute mark right now. So I do like to keep this shorter, but I know I'm just getting back, and I had this like a rather longer introduction today. So still, I hope you had a good time over the holidays if you're celebrating, and looking forward to a new year, and I mean, of course, the new week and the new year as well. Have a good day.